Alright, in this episode of The Journey, I'll show you how to make your own custom wood knife scales for your EDC pocket knife. Coming up. Alright, welcome back to another episode of The Journey. On this episode, we delve into another DIY project to customize our EDC pocket knife. Now, if you're like me and you've been bit by the EDC bug, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you've been doing it for a while, the natural progression in this is that you want to start customizing your stuff. Of course, you can always buy a new knife, but I guarantee you it's much more satisfying and you'll get much more enjoyment out of a custom project that you did on your own. It'll always be a conversation piece when you brought it out, and it'll save you a few bucks too. Here's the Patient, the Civivi Mini Mastodon. And they had the standard variation as well as the Damascus variant that you see here with carbon fiber scales. Now, online I didn't care for the carbon fiber scales. Spoiler alert, whenever I actually got it in hand, I do love the carbon fiber scales. So we're going to do this in a way that doesn't damage the carbon fiber scale, so if I ever want to switch that back, I can. But as soon as I saw this knife, for the price point, well under $100, with the flipper tab and the bold styling, and the iconic cleaver hole on the blade, it jumped out at me as being a great project knife. I figured I'd really embellish that cleaver theme. Now, some of you know this about us, but we love to cook in this house, and so this is really appealing to me. Plus, it'll serve me well when I'm doing more serious food prep out on the trail or when I'm car camping. I went online and got some knife scale blanks. There's lots of online vendors. I got this from Bell Forest Products, and most of them are around $10, give or take. I ended up getting Honduran Rosewood and Thuya Burl. These are book match 3/8 by 5-inch blanks, and what book match means is that they're actually cut sequentially in the log so that you'll see two scales that look the same. I think on this project I'm going to do the Honduran Rosewood. That should give this knife the character that I'm looking for. Now, for this project you'll need a few tools, most of which you'll use for many other projects. You'll need tools to disassemble the knife, super glue, acetone or nail polish remover to remove the super glue, ideally a belt sander to make quick work of this, and a router with a flush trim bit. You'll need assorted sandpaper and some sort of oil to finish the knife scales. You'll also need a drill for drilling out the screw holes and countersinking the heads. I'll show you a tip later on for how to best do that. Now, if you don't already own a router, the cheapest router to get is what they call a trim router. They're very small. They have a lot of the same functionality, except they don't fit most router tables, which is ideally what you want here. Now, to save money, and also because we don't need the utmost precision on this project, you can literally make your own router table with some 1/4-inch plexiglass and a couple of clamps. I just took off the standard base plate on the router, marked the holes in the plexiglass, drilled through, and then countersunk for the heads. And then I used that new plexiglass plate as the new base plate, flipped it upside down, and clamped it to the table. This will serve well as we use our flush trim bit to trace the old scales to the new. And the first step is disassembling the knife. Now, I recommend that you wipe down the inside of the scales with acetone and the new blanks before gluing them, to make sure that any dust and oil is wiped off of them to promote adhesion. Glue your scales. So pay attention to the book match whenever you glue these. Try to be identical on the blocks of wood. Make note of where they were cut and literally lay them like a book. Spread them out, and then make sure your knife scales do the same. Alright, now you want to set the depth of your router bit so that the ball bearing will ride obviously on your pattern, the existing scale, and the blade itself comes up just shy of touching the other scale. Alright, so this is my future editor self just chiming in real quick with a quick tip. Before you take the scales to the router, try to take off as much material as possible. The belt sander would be great for this, or if you have access to a bandsaw or a jigsaw or coping saw, try to get, within 1/8 of an inch to the scales as you can. It's going to make it a lot safer whenever you actually take that to the router. Okay, back to the video. Now it's time to drill out the screw holes. You're going to have much, and I mean much with a capital M, a much easier time if you use a drill press. Go very slowly. Your friend here is actually going to be a Forstner bit in taking your time. Now use the existing scales as a pattern to drill for the shank of the new screw, and separate the scales using a knife, and use a Forstner bit to counterbore your screw heads. Now don't forget to clamp down your workpiece to the table, and don't hesitate to use a backing piece of pine or something cheap behind your scales, just so it doesn't splinter and split the back. Now your friend here is a Forstner bit. Boom! It's going to ensure you have a clean counterbore and not the taper that usually you have with a normal split point bit. Also, another good trick is measuring the thickness of your scale compared to the stock scale, and then measuring how deep the counterbore goes. When you deduct the counterbore thickness from the overall thickness, you'll know it's there for material behind the screw, and you're going to make sure that the threads don't stick out too far or come up short. Now the trick to this is actually on the back of your calipers. You'll see that part that sticks out right there is going to give you a measurement for how deep the hole is. And then this main part right here is how you can measure how thick the actual scales are. Now use your best judgment. If your knife has a hole really close to the outside edge of the scale, you might not even want to drill that on the press. You can actually drill these very slowly using a bit and just your fingers. I chose to do that in a couple. Full disclosure, I had some screw holes really close to the outside edge, so I chose to counterbore just using my fingertips, and it does need a little bit more work and fitment. So, it was 2 a.m. I wanted to get the video out to you folks, and so there's still a little bit more work to do, but I was able to wrap the video up for you and get it out to you that way. Also, the head on the Civivi pivot pin doesn't align with the normal size found in a Forstner bit set, so I'm going to have to do some searching to find the one that fits. These scales are pretty fragile until you assemble them with a knife. So if you do crack them, don't freak out. It's not the end of the world. This stuff takes great. A little super glue, any epoxy. You can actually reassemble the scales and nobody's going to know but you. You can sand it down after, put a coat of oil, and really it disappears. Just assemble the knife, don't tell anyone, and nobody else is going to be any the wiser. Now it's time to belt sand the scales down to final thickness. Be real careful. And then hand sand, increasing in grit up to at least 400 or higher. The higher the grit, the higher the sheen. Now wipe on some oil finish. I chose to use mineral oil because it's food safe, it's non-permanent, and it gives me the matte look that I'm looking for. Well, honestly, I couldn't be happier with the way it came out. I do have a little bit more fitting and finishing of the screws, but I love the way it came out. It's got that nice matte finish I was looking for. Custom wood scales. So just a little more fitting and this thing's going to be good to go. So if you enjoyed this video, please let me know. Hit the thumbs up. If you haven't already, please consider hitting subscribe. I appreciate it and would love to see you back here. As always, stay safe out there and I'll see you on the next one. We'll have another episode coming up soon, where I add a few finishing touches to the knife to continue with this themed build. I hope to see you guys there.